One of the most famous paintings of the 19th century is going to be, of course, Starry Night, incredibly popular in dorm rooms across the country. But let's look at the piece. Now, this is similarly expressionist, very similar to his Night Cafe, but kind of going in the opposite direction. Now, at this time, he was living at an asylum in the south of France. And what you're seeing is not the sky as it appeared, but rather how the artist felt about the sky. And of course, some people say that he's trying to capture the wind in these swirls, that he's trying to capture universal energy. But it's equally possible that he's trying to capture the tranquility that he feels while painting it. It's kind of tricky to say. Because, of course, this is biographical context. We don't know exactly what was going through the artist's head, and anyone who says that they do is probably lying to you. But getting away from the sky for the moment, the church may or may not be his attempt to reconcile with religion. Now, this is kind of interesting because the architecture of that church would place it in Flanders, in Northern Europe, and yet the rest of the scene is happening in southern France. The church doesn't belong. One of these things is not like the others, and it's the church. And the church is similar to what he would have seen during his missionary days, so it's quite possible that this is an attempt at visual reconciliation, seeking mercy from a church that he turned his back on. Now, let's look at the piece as a whole. There's one other thing I want to bring up, which is this idea of balance. Now, the piece appears to be asymmetrical, as almost all artwork does. But when we look at, imagine that I have a scale, and I have, one of these scales like justice holds. So we've got our little plates on either side and something like that. And what we have is this massive cypress tree. It's dark, it's massive, it's a huge form, and it would sit over here. On the other side, we have smaller forms. We have the dark mountain, which is really against atmospheric perspective, but is necessary to start to balance out that tree. So we have a smaller element. And then we have the mountains on this side as well as the moon. So we're starting to pile things up. The church, the trees in the background, again, piling things up. Eventually, you could imagine the scale being balanced between the giant cypress on one side and the moon, landscape, church, etc. on the other. So it really does have a great, strong composition. The stars have that same radiant quality that we saw in Night Cafe, but here it seems more peaceful because instead of a sickly yellow casting off from the light, what we get is this really tranquil yellow, something that reminds us of the stars, and this really bright star down below with white as opposed to yellow with most of the others. The swirl moving around, again, has this very relaxing form. And there's a reason for that. It's highly curvilinear. We like curved forms for relaxation. If you open a yoga studio, for example, that kind of shape would work in the design. And even here, where you think it comes together, again, we get this curve continuing on. So we are relaxed by the image. We're drawn in for exactly the opposite reasons that we are pushed away from Night Cafe. This is not an air of madness. This is an air of calmness. Now, theoretically, the dark blue color could express Van Gogh's depression, but more than likely it goes far deeper. What he's doing is he's depicting something as he feels it, not as he sees it. Obviously, he's seeing some elements of this, but this cypress tree could easily be from somewhere else in the country. The village and the hills could be real, could be something that he's seeing in the south of France, but again, the church belongs somewhere completely different. So this is where we're starting to really see that element of artist as expressionist, expressing their own views, their own feelings into the work, not just through color, but in Van Gogh's case, through composition.